So with us today, we're joined from Germany by the Athletics' Ollie Kay and Matt Slater as well. Now, gents, you were both at the game last night. Could you just paint a picture of what that atmosphere was like in the stadium? I mean, were England fans supportive? I was watching it at home. I definitely heard boos, but I'm so interested to know what it was like right there in the stadium, Ollie.
In terms of during the match, during the 90 minutes, it was really, really positive and almost surprisingly so. There were no boos or no real groans, even as passes went astray and there was a lack of intensity, whatever. It felt like the atmosphere was positive while they were playing. There were boos at half time, but second half started. It was more of the same. England fans were singing very loudly and quite enthusiastically, and then it came to full time, and then it came out. Look, it was booze. I've heard worse. It wasn't like the game against Algeria in Cape Town in 2010, which was where the booze actually drowned out the vuvuzelas. They were so loud, but it was it was. I think it became more hostile, and I don't know whether the TV picked this up because they probably went into an ad break. But when Southgate and the players sort of went to applaud the fans and thank them, I think that probably brought more of the ill feeling to the surface. And Southgate himself got particularly booed and got a few things thrown at him, and that's probably two or three people out of a crowd of sort of 45,000, 50,000, something like that. So let's not say all England fans were throwing things at him, but yeah, it felt increasingly hostile really the longer Southgate was out there.
Yeah, and Matt, to a certain degree, based on how England have played in this tournament, I guess you could excuse why there is a little bit of negativity around.
Um, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's one thing to boo, isn't it, and to grumble on the way home and to grumble on podcasts. I think throwing stuff at him was a bit out of order, but as Ollie points out, I think it's really really important. You always put these things in context. I saw three empty plastic pint pots thrown on. One got quite near him, sort of bounced around his feet. It was quite unusual because the final whistle goes. The fans have been really good. It was one of the best away supports I'd seen at an England game. First half they were noisy. There were a lot of them. It was at least 3-1, maybe 4-1. England, Slovenia in the ground. Second half was really good. There was a bit of a club atmosphere. They got behind the team. They sensed that the second half performance was better and maybe just needed a little bit more energy. And I thought this is really, really, really good. You've arrived. Thank you. And then the final whistle goes, and there were a lot of boos. Again, Ollie makes the point that it wasn't. I don't think it was sustained booing. I think most of them dashed to the trams to get back to Cologne to have a beer. And then what you had was the players come out, subs come out, and a lot of people come down the front and clap. Slovenian fans at the other end are going crazy, like they've won the group, and proper celebration down there. None of them leave. 75-80% of England fans were out of the ground within 3-4 minutes. I thought it was quite unusual and very much sort of a message by Southgate. Brave, if you like, and he is brave. He doesn't shirk this stuff, as he then discussed in the press conference. Him and Holland behind him, Steve Holland just behind him, but very much Gareth, chose to walk and do a little half lap of appreciation on his own, quite close to the touchline, clapping. And he got lots of applause back. I'd say there were 4 or 5 rows of England fans clapping him. However, mixed within those 4 or 5 rows of clapping were people booing, presumably right next to, so there's a real sort of disagreement. I think the fan base is split. Someone was clapping. There's a guy there who's doing his best. He's clapping at me. I'm going to clap back. Someone right beside them booing. That's not good enough. So that's where we are. We're divided on how we feel about him.
Yeah, I guess post-match, Gareth Southgate spoke about that incident, and something that sort of permeates for me is that he talks about, the most important thing here is that the supporters stay with the team, and he goes on to say, I understand it, not going to he's not particularly going to be backing away from it. What did you guys both make of his reaction? Ollie, we'll start with you in particular.
In terms of what Matt was saying, yeah, I agree. It was, I mean, given that he spoke afterwards about how he was trying to sort of relieve the pressure on the players
Mm.
by going and thank the supporters, two important things, by going out of his way to applaud them and probably going beyond the call of duty to applaud them. I wonder whether it perhaps became a negative that he was there. Perhaps it was a misjudgment. Perhaps he misjudged the mood of he, because I don't think him being booed so much was particularly helpful for the players. I don't know. Would they have got the same if Southgate hadn't been there? I'm not sure they would. Um, but in terms of what he said, no, I think he is. I think he's correct that there's been a bit of an unusual atmosphere around the camp, but and it's been different to the previous few tournaments, and much more like the sort of negativity of old. But there's a reason for that. It's because they've played miserably in all three games. They've won, they've won one, drawn two, only conceded one goal. They've won the group. They played terribly in large spells of all three of those games. And it's very hard not to get, whether you're a fan watching from home, whether you're a journalist in the press box, whether you're a fan who's paid, thousands and thousands of pounds to be there. It's very hard not to be pretty miserable about the way England are playing. So that's why the response and the mood around England is different. He said himself that every performance until last night, strangely, hasn't been good enough. And last night wasn't an improvement. It was they had a lot of possession, but it was a game where they'd already qualified. They were playing what I think most people would say was the weakest team in the group, the team that has possession the least. They were expected to dominate possession. They were also expected to create chances and score goals, and they didn't. What would you say? A couple of half chances over the 90 minutes, and that's been it for England the whole tournament. So the reason for the negativity is performances, and that's something that they're not used to. This modern England team under Southgate, because it's always been good at tournaments before now. There've always been people at home grumbling about, oh, why is he not playing this player? Why is he not playing that player? Oh, I'm so bored. But they've been getting to quarterfinals and semi-finals and a final. These have been good times by the inglorious history of the England team. This is not currently a good tournament. Maybe they click and maybe they go further and it becomes I remember a few weeks ago when everything was doom and gloom. But no, it didn't. It doesn't feel good at the moment. It feels like everything is negative, and the only ones who can really change that are Southgate and the players.
Matt, are you surprised by how quickly the mood has changed? I mean, look at the previous tournaments, right? There was it's coming home at energy. There was a statesman energy, especially with Gareth Southgate, the way he conducted his interviews, the way he kind of quieted the storm and just focused on the team, shadowed them from all the criticism, and just let the work on the pitch do the talking.
It's a good question. Am I surprised? No, not really, because isn't this what happens to all England managers? It's like politicians; their careers end in failure. I think this just goes with the job. It's an impossible job, right? I think there are a few things, and he himself said this when asked, what's different this time? And I think it's expectations. And, there are sort of various ways of looking at that. The first is our results have got better under him. Semi-final, final, quarter-final. And I think the other thing is, and look, England fans, England media, England the nation gets sort of pilloried for this. This sort of, we come into every tournament, we're arrogant, we overrate ourselves, etc., etc. Yes, in the past, almost certainly, and decades and decades of this. I actually think in more recent years, we don't really do that. Well, some people do. I can't speak for everybody, but pretty much everyone I talk to, and I think the media is much more even-handed these days because we've just been through it so many times. I think it's more sort of something that's projected upon us. And I think the reason that the expectations are high is objectively you look at that team and it's good. Expectations have risen for a solid reason. These guys play well for good clubs, where a third party, the manager of that club, rates them and plays them alongside other good players from other nations. They contribute to those teams. This is not, little Englanders saying our guys are amazing. Our players are good. Bellingham, good. Kane, good. Foden, good. All right? These are not controversial things to say. So it's that raising of expectations because of recent performance, but also look at that team. And I think that is his problem. And even in those more positive experiences where he changed the culture, undoubtedly, and his communication skills, very good. And there's a play written about him, Dear England. It's like a love poet. It's a sort of a love letter to his soft skills. And yet, even in those good performances, there was a sense that he was being outcoached at the key times, that he was getting lots right, but he was getting that crucial last bit just wrong. And I think that has grown. The one thing I would say, we'll probably get into this a little bit more at the end when we're sort of trying to think of positive and negatives. I actually, this might be just me being completely controversial. I actually didn't think they played that badly last night. I thought they were unbelievably. I thought they were poor against Serbia. I thought they were dreadful, absolutely dreadful. I cannot. It was one of the worst performances I've seen by sort of any team against Denmark. Utterly awful. I was so depressed after that game. I thought last night was much better. Still wasn't good enough. They're not clicking. I'm not going to suggest that. But I think it was terrible last night. Now, is that enough? No. But I don't believe last night was the catastrophe that many, because I discussed it all the way home as well with various people. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was so low after Denmark.
Yeah, Ollie. Let's not forget England have topped the group. They already qualified before this match anyway. But this phrase keeps popping in my head that Gareth Southgate talks about, this unusual environment. Is that negativity justified? The job's been done. The team are through to the next round.
Yeah, you can look at it in different ways. If you look at the fact that England have won the group, they've only conceded one goal. They're unbeaten. That's all positive, but it's just that the performances, and I think it's only really the last. Look, it reminds me a lot of 2010 World Cup, and maybe the 2006 World Cup, where there were high expectations. It was that sort of golden generation team, and by 2010 they were kind of on their last legs. But performance, I think they've ended up finishing second to the US in 2010, but they won the group in 2006, and it just felt like they weren't building enough momentum. They performed so poorly. You normally expect to at least click in one of the group games. They hadn't done that in either of those groups. They haven't clicked in this group, and I think people just see. Look, I think there's a self-perpetuating thing where the more negative it becomes off the pitch and in terms of everything around the team, the more it sort of weighs on the team. We've seen that happen before. I don't think the media coverage has been in any way hysterical or excessive. I think it's been critical in the right way and in the right areas. I don't think it's ever been any personal to any players or to the manager. I think it's been reasoned criticism. Obviously, you get some wild criticism on social media, but in terms of the many football fans and bloggers and podcasters, etc., I follow, it's generally very, very rational. I'm just, when he talks about unusual environment, I know he's talking about everything sort of outside of his bubble, but I think there's also an unusual environment by Southgate era standards within the group. I said, I think I wrote before the tournament started that some of the vibes that were coming out of the camp weren't what they'd been before. I think there was a lot of dissatisfaction and unhappiness about some of the squad selections that Southgate made with Jack Grealish and Marcus Rashford, Jordan Henderson, Harry Maguire, all left out, and I could understand all of those decisions on an individual basis. But I think it left something missing within the group in some ways, and I think it left some of the big characters out, and it just felt like there was a bit of, you probably read about on the squad selection day that a lot of the players really weren't happy, and a couple of the players made their feelings known about some of the omissions. And I've not felt from the outside that the mood within the camp, even before the game started, has been anything like it has been at previous tournaments. Even when they won the first game, there were a few grumbles coming out. So he can talk about the unusual climate, unusual environment out in that bubble outside the team, but I think there's also an environment within the team which is probably a lot more like the England teams of the past than the happy clappy, cheery, holistic, we all love each other, touchy-feely England of the Southgate era.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Gareth Southgate spoke about easing young players into this environment. The likes of Kobbie, Mainoo, obviously Cole Palmer, pop to mind. Those are two players currently playing for two clubs who have been in chaos, and we maybe say this is a bit of chaos. Those are the players you technically think would want to shine in a tournament like this, Matt.
Yeah, and look, if we're talking about positives, I thought Kobbie Mainoo was one, and I thought Cole Palmer was another. So there you go. Should it have taken 2.5 games for Southgate, and don't forget the friendlies too, to realise that Conor Gallagher and before him Trent Alexander-Arnold weren't the answer there? I think this is what people are picking up, right? That there's an awful lot of appreciation for Southgate's body of work. The bloke's a good guy, but the team, is it right? And to a lot of people, it just was patently not right. We could sort of see it wasn't working. Again, look, I'm good. God, am I going to be the positive one today? I'd like to think we've all learnt that lesson now. So let's go on. I would like to have seen, as Ollie points out, in the past England have done this, right? But then there has been sort of a good third game. Most sort of successful teams in tournaments just give you something from the group stage. Oh, that was good. The promise of things to come. Whilst I do genuinely believe last night was better, and last night wasn't a dreadful performance. Last night was a okay performance, particularly in the second half. But we didn't click. We didn't score a goal. We made some. I thought we made some chances. But it wasn't like amazing. I'm not, I didn't bounce out of the ground. But look, I wouldn't mind as well. Kobbie Mainoo, really good. Yes, I'm excited about that. Cole Palmer in his little cameo. Nice to see Gordon get on the pitch as well. Look, there's It's about getting obviously getting the shape right, but sometimes it's about backing the right horses, right? They're all good players, but some of them just arrive at the right time. Whether it's just their moment, they're fit. They just fit with the other players, and as a manager, you just got to sense that. But I think Ollie's made really, really good points about even coming in to this. This didn't feel like the happy camps of the last 3 tournaments. I do think the stuff we were hearing around sort of selection day was strange for this era England.
Definitely very different managers in their approach. Is back to what Matt was saying. Is there something here about, just taking the chances, taking a mad risk that will let these, I guess, kids that are chomping at the bit really show what they're made of?
I would be quite surprised if Cole Palmer starts on Sunday. I think I could see Kobbie Mainoo starting because I think others have probably played themselves out of the team in some ways. The Alexander-Arnold experiment didn't particularly work, but the Conor Gallagher one definitely didn't work. And I think Southgate will probably look at that second half and think, if we're going to try to be on the front foot, if we're going to have tried to have some energy and some kind of balance between Alexander-Arnold's passing and Gallagher's energy, then it's probably Mainoo. And Mainoo's a really talented player who, as you say, as Postecoglou said, would not have been considered anywhere near the England team 12 months ago. But he's played his way in, and others haven't made it hard for him. I mean, he didn't play brilliantly in the warm-up games, but which I think led Southgate to look beyond him in terms of the starting lineup for the 3 group games. But nobody played brilliantly. Nobody's played even well in Euros in terms at the Euros in terms of the midfielders. So I think he will start. Palmer, I'd be more surprised about, just because I think you could still see something from Saka on the right hand side. I think perhaps it will be Palmer to come off the bench if things are not going well. But yeah, there were definitely encouraging signs. But I think it was a really good situation in which to come on as a sub, to be honest. I think if you look at a team that's absolutely dominating possession against a team that's just clinging on for a draw, which will get them third place, and it's an inferior team to, if you've got probably, most of the best players on the pitch, you're dominating possession. It's a really good situation to come into. Pressure off. You've already qualified, and Mainoo did well. Palmer did well in a short space of time, but I would be surprised if it's Palmer for, say, Saka or Bellingham or Foden at a weekend. I think we're more likely to see Saka start and Palmer probably first cab off the rank in terms of the substitutes.
All right, let's move on, because joining us now to get further into this debate, we've got our football tactics writer, Liam Tharme, with us. Liam, so good to have you with us. And I know there's a fair bit of negativity to start the show so far, but I wanted you to maybe give us a bit more of an insight into the tactical aspect of things, especially where England's main problems have been. What has been the problem tactically in your view?
It's a culmination of a few things. I think there's been some really fair points around this. The team that you see now isn't the team Southgate's tried to build, at least sort of in its entirety. There's a left side of the defence which is missing its entire left half from what he would choose. I think it's quite a risky gamble, really, sort of hoping Luke Shaw will be fit and will be, even if he is fit, at a good enough level to play. And it's the kind of risk that I think we've not really seen from Southgate. Normally, he's quite, I think for some people, jarringly sensible and jarringly quite predictable, and has sort of backups and players ready to go. So I think the left side looks quite predictable in attack, which is no massive fault of Kieran Trippier, because that's what happens often when you put a right footer there. I was more surprised that off the back of that, to have Phil Foden then as the winger, a really creative player, but someone who seems to play well at City because he's got players around him. And there's now sort of a debate in some of the nerdy tactical circles that I'm in about maybe he's got too much freedom now in an England shirt. People will say, oh, you need to, Southgate shackles players too much. And they say, hang on, maybe Guardiola's actually really structured and that gets the best out of Foden. Whereas if it was maybe a Marcus Rashford or a Raheem Sterling, as we've seen previously in an England shirt, players that will play on the left wing but kind of just carry the attacking burden themselves. Foden's not really that player. He plays passes, he connects really well, but he's not really a get the ball, run at a defender, attack and transition, exploit the space type winger.
Yeah, I'm just interested with the whole Trent Alexander-Arnold experiment as well. Matt, you've got a player that for Liverpool, I mean, his defensive qualities have always been in question in many respects, but his passing ability has always never been in question. Those crossfield passes, switching it from a defensive position to an offensive position, running to the byline, whipping it into the box. But actually, you have a system that's quite narrow that doesn't allow a player then to be able to play those balls, right? So you've got the personnel, but they're not really being used for what their strengths are.
Well, I think, Liam hit the nail on the head. Sitting in that Denmark game, it was so strange. It was like we'd sort of been told, that third, that sort of strip down over there, you're not allowed in there. It was like a drill, right? Like there were sort of cones. You've got to stay on this little 230 bit here. And you think about, what Alexander-Arnold does really, really well. It's those sort of raking passes, pinging it across. But if there's no one there, who's he pinging it to? He's knocking it off for a throw. What's the point of that? We're not playing rugby. So, you've taken out, one of this guy's sort of spidey skills. I actually thought Alexander-Arnold wasn't that bad. And of course, everyone's now sort of discussing this stat, even in the Denmark game, which I've said for the 8th time was dreadful. He actually did try and move the ball forward. The better passes. Remember, he did put Saka away. And it didn't quite run for Saka. And there was another nice pass as well. He was trying. Where he really struggles, and what a surprise! This guy playing midfield is quite difficult. Doing it at this level, great. Good luck. He's not very good on the half turn, is he? And we had this issue in both Serbia and Denmark. And like, it wasn't just him. Like Rice played the worst game I think I've ever seen him play against Denmark. And we had this thing where the ball was going to the midfield and they just would automatically check back or do a sort of 270 to sort of find the safer pass. Foden was about the only one who was taking a pass on the back foot and looking to turn, looking to get that momentum. And I saw more of that from kind of all of them. Mainoo's really good at that yesterday. That pass from a defender, and you could either fake the pass straight back, but you let it run and you go. And you just create half a yard. When Man City really click, they all kind of do that. Trent Alexander-Arnold, that he's learning. I'm not saying he's learning that skill. If he was to play against us lot, he'd do it all the time and look amazing. But he's doing it against international level footballers, and it just wasn't happening. And because Rice wasn't really on it, I don't think Bellingham. I keep coming back to this. Is Bellingham? Is he our undroppable guy? Is he our unsubbable guy? Because for a guy, I'm not saying he's rubbish. I am not saying that. I'm just saying he's not playing very well. And it is so clear to me that he's not playing very well. And I think the thing that really annoyed me last night about him is in games 1 and 2, he moaned at the ref every time he was tackled. And he'd do this little thing where he'd sort of slap his hand on the floor and be out of the game for 10, 15 seconds. So I'd be like, get up, the ball's there, win it back. Last night, he flapped his arms at his teammates every time he didn't get the ball. So his sort of diva-like behaviour had gone from just moaning at the ref to moaning at his teammates. I'd have had him off after an hour of that.
I guess, Ollie, in that respect, and talk about Jude Bellingham, if you're looking at the poster boy, technically, of this World Cup, huge campaign coming into this, with his sponsor Adidas and all that kind of stuff, you can sort of understand the turmoil a coach could be in, not to drop a player like that, but actually for the sake of the team and the dynamics of how the team is playing, surely that is what the coach is there for.
Or even just from the point of view of you've played 270 minutes in a week, just over a week, 9 days. These are pressurized games. The managers talk about how difficult it is after that break to get them back up to speed again, and how you have to manage the minutes carefully. And I would say that if England had won these 2 games, the first 2 games, comfortably, won the group and won it comfortably, and everything was looking good, Southgate would have picked a completely different team yesterday. He would have picked all the fringe players in order to give them minutes. He wouldn't have been trying to play people into form. I think keeping players on the pitch is partly because you want to keep them play them into form, which I don't think is working. But partly, I think, because you probably worry about the consequences. You worry about the consequences of leaving Kane out. You worry about the consequences of subbing him for a second time, or subbing Bellingham, because Bellingham's he's very young, but he's a big player, big personality within the team. I could definitely see the case for subbing him yesterday, but to be honest, in all of these games, I could see a case for subbing 7 or 8 of the players. I don't think many of the players have played well. I don't think I was as negative as Matt about the Denmark game, but I thought I wasn't as happy with last night as Matt was. I thought, of course, you're going to dominate the ball in a game like that, and I don't think the players within that system are playing anything like well enough. And I think also, and I'd love to Liam's view on this, but I feel like this same 11, if you'd played that 11 earlier in the season, they played a very similar 11 with Trippier at left back and with Foden, I think, wide left or wide right, I can't remember, against Italy at Wembley earlier in the season, and it looked great. And I feel the biggest problem around this team at the moment is not the system, although you can pick holes with it, but the just general sense of lethargy and self-doubt that has crept into it. And it's a big issue with the team. And as that deepens, I think the flaws within the imperfect system are exposed and become greater.
Yeah, they did look tired. Looked like they'd put in quite a lot physically, and as you say, there's players that, I think Southgate's kind of equally causing the problem and is also suffering because of the problem of players that have. I think he sort of said physically vulnerable was what he kept repeating in terms of picking the squad and the players that he went for, and I'd say the same obviously then with the lack of left-sided options that he's picked, but. It's a setup which is obviously designed to get a lot out of the front four, who I think all kind of individually. I think Saka's really, really consistent, but you've probably got in Foden and Bellingham players that come in and out of games more, that aren't always consistently in games. Really, I probably had more of an issue in the first two matches because playing back threes or back fives, and that was known well in advance. And I know that England knew that because I did a bit of research and I knew that from the team. So they definitely knew. And there just weren't enough runners. The really good thing about this England team now is how this emerging generation have all been developed or trained through academy football to play football, to have the ball on the floor, to play to feet. But you don't really get many of the Anthony Gordon types now of people that are just going to run and run and run. And it's great. You need the to feet players. You definitely do, especially if you want to attack in the way that England do. But you put all of them in a forward line and you put Kane then dropping in. Suddenly you're not actually doing a lot to pin the defensive line back. You're not doing much to penetrate. You need those runners beyond to combine with the to-feet players. So I'd be amazed to a degree if Southgate sticks with the system as is. My sort of hot take, which I know Arsenal fans definitely shout at me for, is going to a back three and put Bukayo Saka as a left wing back, because I think it's just too much of a gamble to rely on Luke Shaw being fit. And I think the pressure on him would be pretty grim, psychologically and tactically. So I'd go, look, swallow your pride. Not saying you need to do this for the long term, but stick Saka left wing back. Let's get a bit of the left-sided attack back and hopefully, perform a bit better.
Interesting. What about the midfield then? Another Arsenal player, Declan Rice. What do we do in balancing that section?
I think you just need to pass it next to him, right? I think Mainoo's the perfect sort of complement to him, particularly because, as the guys have mentioned, when you've got Alexander-Arnold, whose big strength is generally playing long, and less so playing under pressure, more right when he's got the ball on the halfway line. It's a settled opposition defence and he can pick passes. But if you've not got those wingers or a full-back, a wing-back, whoever that you're sort of releasing into that space, then you sort of lose that. I think he's probably shown as well that he's played in front of Virgil van Dijk for about 5 or 6 years now, because there's some passes he picks which are not necessarily risky, but he's given the ball away in some situations where you go, oh God, there's a counter-attack on here, but he's probably quite used to having Van Dijk behind him. He's going to eat up anything that goes the other way. So I think it's a really worthwhile experiment if you want to look at it that way. Southgate sort of said about having creative solutions throughout qualifying and in friendlies, and I've seen now sort of people who bashed him for not putting Trent into midfield sooner have now gone, why on earth have you put Alexander-Arnold into midfield? It's clearly sort of not worked. So I think a lot of credit for trying something, but I think the whole point of good coaches, and Deschamps is probably somebody he looks to in this regard, is knowing when something has worked or something hasn't worked and tweaking accordingly.
Yeah, Matt, just very quickly, I remember a team with Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, incredible players for clubs, right? Superb. In the England setup, didn't click at times. Does it worry you that we are now a different evolution of an England squad? Great players, great for their clubs, still not clicking. What's missing here? Like, what is the je ne sais quoi that's allowing these players not to click? Because you talk about someone like Deschamps. Of course, France haven't played that great so far in this tournament, but they have a way of cramming stars into a team, and they seem to click.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to cram stars into a team. That's the point, isn't it? Look, am I worried? Well, am I worried that we've got loads of good players? No, I'm old enough. We didn't have loads of good players that not that long ago. We had sort of 4 or 5 at a time. Yeah, it's great. This is a really good era. And look, and again, Southgate, we need to sort of give him credit, or we certainly need to give the system that he is like the star pupil of the credit. This sort of England DNA, this focus on age group football. The closer alignment with teams, the academy, the better coaching. This all came from previous failures. We have got better. We have taken a step forward. He has more players, more and better players to choose from. It's the last bit. It's the hard bit, right? It's finding the blend. It's taking the brave decision. I'm sorry, really good player. You're just not quite working with these other really good players. And that's tough. And I think Ollie made a good point. Sometimes I feel with Southgate that he is taking a decision that, I wonder how this will play if I drop Bellingham. It's easier for me to keep him on, right? Because I think we all agree he's amazing. So I'm going to keep him on, even if he's not playing very well. And even if I think that maybe, I can sort of get more out of those 2 or 3 players if I take him. That's tough. And that we could be talking about rugby union and who's the best fly half. Well, how about the guy that makes everyone outside him better? We could be talking about cricket. We could be talking about all sorts of sports. This is the job. Find the blend.
My view on that would be that Southgate, over the first 3 tournaments, and particularly the first 2 tournaments, really did that, and he really found the blend. And to say that he's doing what England managers have always done and shoehorning all the best players, the big name players in, and abandoning the system. It's the people who are probably shouting loudest about that are probably the people who shouted loudest about being bored by the system in the past. I think there is a valid criticism this time because he seems to have gone away from a system that previously worked. It wasn't universally popular by any means, but he always had 1 or 2 players who were sort of more system players, whether it was Jordan Henderson, whether it was Calvin Phillips, and people were saying, no, put another star in, put Jack Grealish in, put Marcus Rashford in, whatever. Take out Mason Mount, we don't see what he does. The system always worked well in the past, and I think it's not working this time. And I think part of the reason is that there is just such a lack of alternatives in midfield. I think the fact that Alexander-Arnold started the first 2 games in midfield and Gallagher started the 3rd game in midfield is because there really isn't the type of midfield player that Southgate was looking for, unless it proves to be Kobbie Mainoo or unless it proves to be Adam Wharton. But they've come so late into the setup over the past few months, and deservedly so. But they've got so little tournament experience, so little international experience, so little club experience that I can understand the reluctance to play them. But when we say he's putting all the best players in, I think that's exactly what he hasn't done in the past, and it's by going away from that sort of slightly boring, conservative but highly effective formula is what has been England's problem.
Okay, well, let's look at some positives, right? England are through, having not really played that well, and they were through before the match against Slovenia. And actually on that match, Liam, I guess you could also say that, we've touched on it, the decision Southgate made at half-time, bringing certain players on, did make a massive difference to the way the team ticked.
Yeah, they looked a lot more fluid. I don't think I've ever seen a manager bring in a player on a yellow card for a 3rd round group game. Normally you do the reverse, you take the player out. But yeah, I thought they clicked a lot better. It looked for sort of a brief moment like they sort of were changing the build-up ever so slightly. We had a period where I think sort of the first 15 minutes of the second half where Trippier was sort of really tucked round and Kyle Walker was really pushed onto that last line, kind of like Walker playing as a wing-back, Foden doing the same on the opposite side, and then a very right-footed back three, obviously, and your two midfielders in front. And there were a couple of switches of play from the left to the right where they did try and sort of pick out Walker. I think back to that goal he scored, I think, against Ukraine away in qualifying, where he sort of crashed the back post, and clearly we're trying to add a little bit that side. A few of those were under hit, and then he had to sort of sprint inside and quickly try and sort of deny the counter-attack. So they definitely look like they tried to sort of change the build-up a bit, and sort of the benefit, I guess, I know they don't know who, at the time of recording, we don't know who they're going to play just yet, but there's a lot of similarities to all the Group E teams in terms of how they defend, sort of their system, their formation. So there's probably a slight benefit there that you're going to get a certain type of opponent in terms of their style with and without the ball, rather than it possibly being a much more wide open situation.
Yeah, Ollie, you've recently written about this, of who England might be facing in the latter stages of the tournament. And I mean, look, as we know, this has been a really fascinating tournament, and some teams have started to surprise us, but it seems a bit favourable for England.
Well, it seems a bit favourable for everybody who's in the same half of the draw. I've written about this morning, about how England have ended up on what looks like the easiest side of the draw, and I think England, one of the reasons why it's considered the easiest side of the draw. If you look at the quadrant which England are in, it will include Italy, Switzerland, England, and obviously a third place team, which maybe the Netherlands, maybe it could be any of the four teams in Group E. All of those four teams will go into the knockout stage having won once. Then you look at the upper quadrant. You've got Spain and Germany. Spain have won 3 out of 3. Germany have won 2 out of 3. You look at Portugal in the top half of the draw, who have so far won 2 out of 2. France, who they've not set the world alight either, but they have they look like one of the stronger teams. So yeah, it looks really unbalanced. Maybe it looks less unbalanced on paper because you're looking at England, Switzerland, and Italy and thinking, oh well, they're all decent teams, but they've not played well. Austria have been the only team currently in the bottom half of the draw who have played well. So it definitely looks like, look, say England are playing the Netherlands on Sunday, and then they play, say they get through and then play Switzerland or Italy. That doesn't sound easy at all. But I think when it gets to semi-final stage, we will see two very strong teams in the top half of the draw, where Spain, Germany, Denmark, Portugal, France all are at the moment, and we will see weaker teams coming from the other side of the draw. And I've got absolutely no confidence that one of those weaker teams will be England.
Let's sort of circle back, Matt, to how we started, and sort of ending or finishing on this is really Gareth Southgate, really, in where he's at as the England manager moving forward. Do we feel that perhaps this is one tournament too many for a coach like Gareth Southgate, or do you think there's still a lot of fire in his belly if he doesn't win this Euros tournament?
Oh, blimey. He said Ollie, did he say he was in a good place or a happy place last night?
I think he said in a good place.
He said a good place. Right.
I took to mean Cologne.
yeah. Cologne, by the way, is a good place.
It's a good place.
So it was. Yeah. So it was a great question. I can't remember who asked it, but it was the last question. We'd been asking him to sort of kind of explain really what he meant by this sort of strange environment thing. We kind of knew, but we just wanted him to sort of say it. And then there was quite a good question actually from a Slovenian journalist, sort of saying you didn't appear to have a plan B, which I thought was quite nice. But the last question was, look, Are you having a good time? You've talked a lot about the team, and he's very good at that kind of like, protecting the team and kind of bigger picture stuff. How basically it was sort of, Gareth, how are you? And he said, I'm in a good place. And I was like, mate, are you sure? I mean, I suppose he couldn't say, oh, he's dreadful, but I wish I knew the answer to that. Like I said, look at the history of England managers. Go right back. It all ends this way. They very rarely get to sort of choose how they go out. Hey, if we win this, the bloke's a legend. I think if we make a final, if things start getting better, is it another one of those sort of glorious failures? Maybe that would be the sort of time to be honest and go, look, hey, 4 tournaments. Look at the culture. Look how far we've come. But if we fail, like if we lose basically the next 2 games, one of the next 2 games, it will feel like a poor campaign unless there's something remarkable in that defeat. I don't know, some amazing stroke of bad fortune. But look, I thought we were going to do some positives. There have been some positives. Mark Gahey, anyone?
Yes, unsung hero. Yeah,
I'm sorry. I just think he's played really, really well. That's it. That's all I got.
Oh, Matt, you froze there very quickly.
Oh, did I? I just. Yeah. That's all I've got in terms of like absolute kind of unequivocal positives. He's the only one.
It was a good time to freeze as well. Yeah, because you had nothing else to say. Liam, what do you think in terms of Gareth Southgate?
Yeah, it's a can of worms, right? It's something I've probably got multiple opinions on. I think people are quite polarised and very much either sort of pro or anti-Southgate. I probably get labelled as quite a Southgate apologist. But I could probably see what he's trying to do more than most people. I'm probably trying to be more empathetic towards it. He's quite clearly studied a lot of successful tournament teams. I think France are a big inspiration for him and has sort of looked at as we sort of spoke about, their balance of creating a structure within which sort of superstars can thrive. And obviously Mbappe is a very different type of player to Kane, but that similar sort of attacking reliance and how you then construct and bring players in and bring players out. I think the way he's brought through young talent with sort of previous limited tournament experience has been phenomenal. This tournament has maybe been a bit more forced than before, but he's always been, the England teams have been young, I think, at tournaments under him. They've won opening games, which England didn't ever do sort of in my lifetime, let alone people that, are older than me that can go back even further. So that part's been really good. And I think the main positive I've got so far from this group stage is they've been okay defensively. They've been pretty good defensively in terms of you look at in their box. I don't necessarily mean to say that they're sitting deep, whether people want to be pro or anti that. They've conceded once, and that's from way outside the box, which should probably be one of the goals of the tournament from about 30 odd yards out. So that's always the kind of base that you find good tournament teams are built from. They are putting themselves in situations where they can win games 1-0 or by a marginal goal. You just can't get away in tournaments nowadays with being that volatile and being a big team at either end in terms of chances and goals. So, yeah, people won't be, again, it's kind of the absence then, isn't it, of anything sort of extreme that is a positive there. So, yeah, without being phenomenal in the opposition half, they've been pretty good in their own third.
Okay, well, also another player, Jordan Pickford, been solid. I'll add that one to the list, Matt. Finally, Ollie, especially if you're thinking of Gareth Southgate, Sunday could be a really defining moment for him. Not just for his job, but I guess whatever he does next in his managerial career, don't you think?
I do think that, yeah. I mean, I think if he were to, we assume he's going to leave the job at the end of the after this tournament, and probably by mutual agreement with the FA. I think both are probably ready for something new. I think if you looked at Southgate's previous 3 tournament records, his record as an England manager is really, really good. I think when people laugh at and deride and pull his record apart and nitpick with everything and say easy draws or great generation of players. Look, England have had easy draws in the past. They've had great generations of players in the past. They've never looked as much of a team over consecutive tournaments and over more than a sort of 4-week period than they have under Southgate in my lifetime. I think he's been the best England manager of my lifetime, but I don't think he's been the best manager to have managed England. I've always had this question in my mind about whether what he's done with the England job he could translate into a top club job. He's been linked with Manchester United, and I don't think that would be a good fit at all. I couldn't really see him being that sort of energizer, the person that needs a club like that needs day to day to just bring real change. But I don't know if he had an amazing tournament and solved all those, removed all those few remaining question marks about him, then I think maybe we would look at him differently. But I think this has been a tournament so far, at least, to reinforce some of the doubts rather than underline some of the many strengths that he's brought to the job over the previous 7.5 years. So yeah, I'll be fascinated by what happens next with him. I think even if he were to win the Euros or reach the semi-finals, I think there will be still some doubts about what he might do at club level. But yeah, it's fascinating. It's just fascinating, regardless of what his future might hold or might not hold. It's just going to be fascinating to see what he does with the rest of the tournament, because it feels really like this is very much building on him now, and it's up to him to find solutions in a way that it possibly hasn't done before.
Yeah, for sure. Will England play on Sunday? Opponents, we don't know yet at the time of recording. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, Matt, Ollie, and Liam as well. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.